Some sounds are not meant to be heard. Some objects are not meant to be touched. And some doors, once opened, can never be closed. In 2026, a group of students discovered something buried for centuries. They thought it was history, but it was a warning whistle. We believe this site belonged to early Mesoamerican ritual migrants. That's creepy. Why does it look like it's in pain? It may have been used in sacrificial ceremonies. Just old air pressure. Let's see if it works again. 2 blows. When the third cry echoes, the gate between worlds shall break. This is not mythology. This is ritual invocation. The third sound will not call death. It will release it.
Have you ever heard a sound so terrifying it could literally summon death? This story begins in the dusty archives of London University, where a group of students, including Daniel and Lewis, unearthed something truly ancient. It was a bone whistle, eerily carved into the shape of a screaming human skull. The artifact felt cold, almost unnaturally so, as if it held a chilling secret within its hollow core. That night, driven by a mix of curiosity and bravado, Daniel snuck back into the dimly lit lab. With a deep breath, he put the whistle to his lips and blew. A piercing, high-pitched scream, not his own, echoed through the empty room. It was a sound of pure agony that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air. The lights in the lab flickered violently, and for a split second, Daniel saw a tall, distorted shadow flit across the far wall. His heart pounded in his chest, a cold dread washing over him. He knew, instinctively, that he had just made a terrible mistake. He quickly hid the whistle, trying to convince himself that what he saw was just a trick of the light, a figment of his overactive imagination. But the memory of that scream and the fleeting shadow was seared into his mind. A few days later, the group was examining the whistle again. Lewis, ever the skeptic, scoffed at Daniel's story of the screaming shadow. "It's just an old piece of bone," he laughed, snatching it from the table. "Watch this." Before anyone could stop him, Lewis put the whistle to his lips and blew, much harder than Daniel had. This time, the scream was louder, more desperate, and it was followed by a sudden, gut-wrenching silence. The lights in the entire building went out, plunging them into complete darkness. When the emergency power finally kicked in moments later, they found Lewis. He was slumped over the table, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. He was dead. Panic erupted. The police ruled Lewis's death as a sudden, unexplainable cardiac arrest. But Daniel and his friend Hannah knew better. They knew it was the whistle. Their professor, a historian named Professor Williams, began a frantic search through ancient texts. Desperate to understand the nature of the artifact they had found, he pored over dusty tomes and forgotten folklore, his office becoming a chaotic mess of books and scrolls. Finally, he found it. Tucked away in a crumbling manuscript, he discovered a chilling prophecy known as the Third Cry. The legend spoke of a bone whistle, carved by a forgotten death cult, a tool used to call upon a malevolent entity. The text was terrifyingly specific. The first blow awakens the demon, the second claims a life as an offering, and the third and final cry unleashes the demon into our world to harvest souls. They had already heard 2 cries. That same night, Hannah was alone in her apartment, trying to make sense of the horror that had unfolded. As she sat in her living room, a sudden chill filled the air, so cold it made her teeth chatter. The lights began to flicker, just as they had in the lab. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room, elongating, stretching upwards until it formed the silhouette of a towering, unnaturally thin creature. It had no face, just a void where features should be. It glided towards her, its movements silent and fluid. Hannah screamed, scrambling backwards, but she was frozen in place by sheer terror. The creature reached out a long, shadowy appendage, its touch feeling like icy fire against her skin. The next morning, Daniel found her huddled in a corner, conscious but unresponsive. Her once vibrant brown hair had turned completely, shockingly white. Desperate for answers, Daniel sought out Dr. Alvarez, a retired expert in occult artifacts whose name Professor Williams had found. Alvarez's home was filled with strange relics and smelled of incense and old paper. When Daniel showed him a sketch of the whistle, the old man's face went pale. He explained the grim truth. The whistle was no mere artifact. It was a key, a beacon, designed to summon a being he called the Lord of the Dead. This entity wasn't just a simple ghost. It was a collector, a shepherd of lost souls. The first cry was a wake-up call, the second a down payment, and the third was the final signal that the gate was open for business. He warned Daniel that the entity was now bound to the whistle, and by extension, to those who had used it. It was hunting them. The news from the hospital was grim. Hannah had vanished. A nurse, visibly shaken, told a bizarre story of seeing a dark, spider-like shape crawling across the ceiling of Hannah's room just before she disappeared. The window was wide open, the cold night air pouring in. Daniel knew. He knew the creature had taken her. He raced back to the university, his mind reeling. As he entered the deserted main hall, a sound stopped him dead in his tracks. It was the whistle. Lying on a velvet display cushion in a shattered glass case, the bone skull was vibrating, emitting the high-pitched scream all on its own. This was the third cry. The air in the hall grew thick and heavy. The ground began to tremble, and a swirling vortex of shadow and sickly green light ripped open in the center of the floor. From within the vortex, spectral hands reached out, and the moans of countless souls echoed in a terrifying chorus. The gate to the underworld was open. The tall, shadowy figure of the Lord of the Dead emerged, its form more solid now, its presence a crushing weight of despair. It turned its featureless face towards Daniel, and he felt a pull, a psychic tether connecting him to the demon. He understood then. He was the final piece of the ritual. The one who blew the first cry was now the anchor, the sacrifice needed to permanently open the gate. He could see Hannah, her white hair stark against the darkness, being pulled into the portal. There was only one way. In a flash of inspiration, Daniel remembered a passage from Dr. Alvarez's books about a binding ritual, a way to sever a demonic connection through purification by fire. He grabbed a canister of flammable solvent from a nearby janitor's closet and a lighter from his pocket. He drew a circle around himself and the portal, doused the floor, and with a final look at Hannah, he flicked the lighter. Flames erupted in a whoosh, creating a wall of fire. He stood in the center, a willing sacrifice. The demon shrieked, a sound of fury and pain, as the flames consumed the ritual's anchor. The portal wavered, destabilized, and then imploded with a deafening roar, pulling the demon and Daniel back into the abyss before vanishing completely. A year passed. Life at the university slowly returned to normal. The story of the cursed whistle became a cautionary tale, a ghost story whispered in the dorms. The whistle itself was recovered, seemingly inert, and placed in a secure exhibit at the City Museum, labeled simply as Ancient Ritualistic Instrument. One afternoon, a young boy on a school trip stared at the screaming skull behind the glass. He noticed a small, almost invisible crack in the casing. Driven by a child's innocent curiosity, he leaned in close and blew a puff of air through the crack. It was just enough. Deep within the bone, a single ruby-red light began to glow, faint at first, then brighter. The Lord of the Dead was awake again, and it was waiting.